We're on with another wonderful discussion in English this time. We wanted to do it in Romanian, but Mr. Dreesen doesn't speak well Romanian, so we're going to do it in English. I want to thank you, and I want to say to all our viewers that I'm sorry for the mistakes I will have. My English is a little bit rusty. I hope you understand all that I'm saying. And I wanted to thank you, and this made my day, my week, my month, my year. This talk, this interview, this discussion is something awesome for me. And I have a brief introduction. With over 500 appearances on national television as a stand-up comedian, a frequent guest on David Letterman, hosted the Tonight Show when David was absent. Opening for Smokey Robinson, Tony Orlando, Gladys Knight, Liza Minnelli, Sammy Davis Jr., and Frank Sinatra. He was Frank Sinatra's opening for 13 years. As an actor, and on television in Murder, She Wrote, Columbo, Touched by an Angel, Spaceballs, a great movie, Man on the Moon, and many, many others. In 2013, he began appearing around the country in a one-man show called An Evening of Laughter and Memories with Sinatra. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tom Dreesen, which I thank again for coming here.
I'm honored. I'm so honored because I've never done an interview in Romania. So this is going to be interesting. See, you say you worry about people not understanding you. I understand you clearly. I'm worried about them not understanding me.
I understand you perfectly, and I hope they will too. But in Romania, there are many fans of stand-up comedy. We are good English speakers, not me, but other people from the country, and they'll understand you perfectly, I think.
Yeah, I think that Frank Sinatra, the wonderful thing about touring with Frank Sinatra for all those years, he wasn't national, he was international. I mean, he sold out in Brazil, 175,000 people one time. Amazing. No single artist ever had that many people come to see him. There's been groups, maybe like the Rolling Stones or something, or the Beatles might have attracted that many people, but one single artist, when he was 78 years old, he sold out in Japan. This is an English singing singer, and yet he was international. So I'm sure in Romania, they play a lot of Frank Sinatra's music as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, big fan. I have some questions. I want to let you talk. I just want to listen. I gathered some questions from the viewers, from my head, some curiosities, and I'll begin with the first one that says, why stand-up? Why stand-up comedy?
Well, I tell you, I never, ever thought that I would be a stand-up comedian. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I grew up in a suburb on the south side of Chicago called Harvey, Illinois. And it was a blue-collar town, steel workers. There were factories and steel mills all throughout the community. They made everything from clutch plates to crankshafts. There were 36 taverns. These are hardworking people. And the mantra when I was growing up in the neighborhood was that you only deserve in life what you work for. So I came from that background. But I had 8 brothers and sisters, and we were very poor, very poor. We lived in a shack. We had no bathtub, no shower, no hot water. It was sometimes rats and cockroaches. It was a poor existence. As a little boy, we had 8 kids in a family. At one time, 5 of us slept in one big bed, crossways, And at 8 years old, I went out shining shoes with my older brother. So I shined shoes in taverns. I set pins in bowling alleys. I caddied in the summertime. I sold newspapers. I had a paper route. Everything to make money to help feed my brothers and sisters. And none of this do I regret. I still say that's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I give motivation speeches. Aside from being a stand-up comedian, I love giving motivation talks. I read hundreds of books on the powers of the mind. And so, I talk on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. So when I tell the classes, that I talk to about my poor childhood, I say that's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And because that's the way I perceive it. All of life is about perception. So I perceive that to be a blessing to have grown up that poor. But I never thought that I'd ever be a comedian. It was the furthest thing from my mind, as I said. When I was shining shoes in all the bars, Frank Sinatra was on the jukeboxes in all the bars. I would hear his voice when I was 8 years old. And that's what my book is about, still standing, my journey from streets and saloons to the stage and Sinatra. Yeah, that's the book, thank you. But that journey is about a little boy, 8 years old, carrying his shoe shine box through the snow from tavern to tavern, trying to make money to feed his brothers and sisters. And in every tavern, he'd hear Frank Sinatra on the jukebox. And the book is about that little boy from the south side of Chicago, hearing Sinatra on the jukebox, to one day carrying Frank Sinatra's coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. So it's that journey from that little boy, from what happened to that little boy there to the end of that book. So anyhow, again, I wandered aimlessly. By the time I was 16 years old, I dropped out of high school. I was, had holes in my shoes and raggedy clothes and kind of poor. And you're oftentimes embarrassed when you're going to high school. All the other kids are dressed so nice, and I was dressed so raggedy. So I dropped out of high school when I was 16, and I ran with a pretty tough crowd on the streets. And I worked in pool rooms and bowling alleys. And by the time I was 17, I was in trouble a lot with the law. And I went in the Navy at age 17, and it changed my life. I spent 4 years in the Navy. I got a high school diploma from the Navy, but I started reading. When we were out at sea, I was on 2 aircraft carriers on 2 different times, but when we were out at sea, I began to read a lot. I read every book I could find on positive mental attitude. I didn't want to go back to the negative life that I had come from. My father was alcoholic. My mother was alcoholic at one time. And so I started reading positive mental attitude books, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, Guide to Confident Living, Dale Carnegie's Positive Mental Attitude, W. Clement Stone, Positive Mental Attitude, Dale Carnegie, Think and Grow Rich. I read all these books and I absorbed them. When I came out of the Navy, I ended up getting married, had 3 kids right away, still wandering aimlessly, going from job to job, never being fulfilled. I would just, I'd do real good at a job, and then I just got bored with it, So, I loaded trucks on a dock, loading trucks. I was a Teamster union guy, and then I dropped my card and I later became management. I was the foreman of all these Teamsters. I was a private detective. I was a photographer. I was an insurance salesman. I was always a bartender, part-time, and I worked construction too. So I went from job to job. But I was praying at that time, Cristi. I was actually saying, God, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? This can't be it. Sometimes I'd be sitting in a bar with my buddies at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and drinking beer and looking around and saying, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belonged. And so I would literally be praying to God, saying, God, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? And then I joined a civic group called the JCs. Those days it was called the Junior Chamber of Commerce. And they attacked problems of the community. If there were problems in the community, they had a problem and learn leadership training program from that project. They learn how to speak in front of an audience, how to serve on a committee, how to chair a committee, how to have subcommittees. And so one of the problems of our community at that time, excuse me, as it is today, were our youth and drugs. So I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children, elementary school children, the ills of drug abuse with humor, a concept I had, get the kids laughing, play some music, and then get them real relaxed, and then plant the seeds of the ills of drug abuse. And helping me with on that project was a young Black man that just joined the chapter. And his name was Tim Reed. And so he and I went into the classrooms. It was a big success because our students were Black and white. And they saw a young Black guy and a young white guy, and we had them laughing and playing music. And so the program became very successful. And on the way out of the classroom one day, a little 8th grade girl stopped by Tim and I and said, you guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team. And the thought of a Black-white comedy team intrigued us because no one had ever done that before. So we became America's first Black and white comedy team. And history shows we were the last. There's never been one since. That was 45 years ago. excuse me, we stayed together 6 years as a comedy team. There were no comedy clubs in those days in America. So we worked all black clubs in the North and the South and all white clubs. And we worked at Playboy Circuit and everything. But we stayed together 6 years, and he wanted me, and the team broke up. And I ended up on the West Coast. I was living in California. I moved out to California. I was living in Chicago, and I moved out to California because that's where the Tonight Show was. Johnny Carson hosted a show called The Tonight Show. And if you one appearance on that show, one appearance, your life would change. It was a stairway to stardom in 1975. Wherever you went in America, people say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. The next question out of their mouth was, oh yeah, you ever been on Johnny Carson? If you hadn't been on Johnny Carson, in the eyes of America, you just weren't a comedian. You might want to be one, you might going to be one, but you weren't one now. So we all migrated from all over the United States to California to try to get on that Tonight Show. And that happened for me. I paid a lot of dues. I hitchhiked up and down Sunset Boulevard, trying to get on at the Comedy Store to work for free. It took a long time, but I finally got on. I finally got the coordinators to come and see me. And I did my first appearance on The Tonight Show in December 1975. And my whole life changed. I never stopped working from that day on. I started doing all these TV shows and touring with every artist imaginable. You mentioned some of them. I toured with, Natalie Cole, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Smokey Robinson, Tony Orlando and Don, Frankie Avalon, James Darren, Mac Davis, all these stars, and eventually Sammy Davis Jr. toured with him for years, and then finally on to Frank Sinatra.
Wow. My heart is beating only when I hear you pronounce those names. My heart is like pounding harder and harder. Can't imagine how that was. My second question was about Tim and Tom, the first black and white comedy duo, which you mentioned. How was that? Did it work? It was very hard. There were the clubs for the black, the clubs for the white at that time. You had shows in both clubs, I think. How was it? I can't imagine.
Well, it was very difficult in those days. In the late 60s, Tim Reed and I became a comedy team in 1969. In the late 60s, America was in turmoil. The Vietnam War was raging, so students were protesting all over America. African Americans were feeling disenfranchised from the system, and they were rioting in every major city in America, including my own backyard on the south side of Chicago, Harvey, Illinois, where I'm from, one of the largest riots in the country. So America was in turmoil, and Tim Reed and I were in the middle of this, trying to make people laugh. We went wherever there was racial tension, we went there. We went to colleges, high schools where there was racial tension. We did 11 prisons in 1 year. We not preaching, not lecturing, just trying to make people laugh. But I think in my looking back over my life, I think sometimes we did more for race relations in America than any book or any classroom could teach, because race relations are about relations. You can't legislate love. The government can't legislate love, and they can't legislate race relations. You have to have a relationship. So what people saw of us when we were on stage, two guys having fun, having a lot of fun, destroying every stereotype we could destroy, we were having a lot of fun. We were having a relationship that America was not having at the time. And so many times, Cristi, a young black kid would come up to us after our show and say, I have a white friend that I'd like to reach out and be friends with. But if I do, the black guys, my buddies, are going to wear me out. But I'm going to, after watching you and Tim today, I'm going to do that. I'm going to reach out to my white friend. And then a white kid would come up and say, I got a black friend that I'd like to reach out to, but the white guys are going to call me names and everything. He said, but after watching you guys, I'm going to go make friends with, get closer relationship. So I think sometimes we did more for race relations than like I say, any classroom or any government could possibly do. But it was tough. There were very few, I really 5% of the people who saw us like this, but there's always that one element. America is not a racist country. Are there some racists in America? Yes. Are there some on both sides? if we worked an all black club and there was a black guy who hated white people, hated them with a passion, he wasn't mad at me. He was mad at Tim for being with me. If there was a white guy who hated black people, you know, he wasn't mad at Tim. He was mad at me for being with Tim. But it's so much, you know, in America, we've got laws. We've got civil rights laws that were passed in the 60s. So you can't discriminate. And if you do, you'll go through courts. So I really believe there's a very small element in this country that is really racist. For the most part, Americans are really open-minded. But Tim and I, America wasn't ready for us back in those days. But we were ready for them, you know. And we're still, the interesting thing is we're still the best of friends to this day. His children call me Uncle Tom, and my children love him. We've had just the greatest relationship and continue on to have that. And now we wrote a book years ago called Tim and Tom, an American comedy in black and white. And now Netflix is talking about maybe doing a 6 one-hour series of what it was like. And we wouldn't play in it. You know, it would be a young Tom Dreesen and a young Tim Reed, showing what it was like touring the United States in that era, you know, before there were comedy clubs. You know.
You heard it here first. If the show comes on Netflix, you heard it here first. When and where did you perform stand-up for the first time? Do you remember?
Yeah, Tim Reed and I, did a club called the Party Mart Supper Club. We kept writing material, trying to see what was funny. We were so new, we didn't know what was funny, you know. And we'd listen to comedy albums and watch comedians on TV. So we finally, after 4 months of writing, we went into a club and tried it out. We asked the club owner, it was a jazz club, could we go on stage? And after the band is done, and he let us go on, and we bombed. We went up on stage and we were going so fast, you know, we just wanted to remember our lines. So we went on stage and went, hi, we're the comedy team. It's in town. He's Tim, I'm Tom, I'm Tom. And we start talking 100 miles an hour. We just drove every day. We drove over here about 5 minutes ago. And yeah, what did you say? And we went so fast. We got done. We rushed off the stage and we got the owner in the corner. We said, how did we do? How did we do? He said, I don't know how you did. You never gave me a chance to laugh. You were going so fast. He said, come back tomorrow and slow down. So then we came back the next night and we were hit. And I can remember like it was yesterday, the first laugh, something I had written. And it was like one of those old B movies where the dark clouds open up and the sun bursts through. My whole being went, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to be a stand-up comedian. I mean, the thought that you could make a living making people laugh overwhelmed me. That could I do this? I couldn't sleep all the night. It was a Friday night. And I got up the next morning, it was a Saturday. And I went to church down the street from where I went to school when I was a kid and where I went to church. And there was no service. It was a Saturday morning. And I actually got on my knees and prayed. I said, God, I now know what I want. I want to be a stand-up comedian. If you let me make my living as a stand-up comedian, God, I'll never ask for anything else. I'll do charity work. I was making all these promises, you know. And that was September 1969. 50 years later, September 2019, I went back to that church and I gave a sermon on Sunday on the power of prayer, you know. And I told that congregation, I knelt right over there. And I prayed for everything that I have today. All my prayers have been answered, you know. But I'm not a deep religious person. I'm a spiritual person. But what I tried to explain to them was, I said, how many of you in the congregation here were thinking about somebody, and the phone rings, and if somebody you haven't seen in years or heard from in years, and you're thinking about them, the phone rings, and it's that person. Or how many of you were thinking about someone, you're walking down the street and you run into that person, you say, I was just thinking about you. And they say, I was thinking about you too. How many has that happened? And the whole congregation raised their hands. I said, if we human beings can transfer thought, and obviously we can, then how much thought can we transfer to a supreme being? Someone who created the universe. So I said, it just makes sense to me that there is power in prayer. You know?
Wow. Let's go to the first Tonight Show. How nervous were you?
I I can't, it's almost hard to describe because like I say, everywhere you went in America, people say, what do you do? Yeah, I'm a comedian. Oh, yeah, have you ever been on Johnny Carson? 26 million people watch that show every night. Now, Freddie Prinze, a comedian, did one appearance on that show, and the next day he got a sitcom. The next day he was a star. He was on the cover of Time magazine. He was in one appearance. So all over America, that's all the comedians heard. Get to that Tonight Show. Get to that Tonight Show. And we all knew that the game changer, if you scored, it also was a game changer if you didn't do good, you know. So when I finally got on, you know, and it's such a pressure night, you know, when I got there, they put you in makeup. You go to makeup, then they take you up to your dressing room, and then you spend a little time up there. Then they bring you down just before you come on, and then you go on. Well, the first night I got there, I got in makeup, sent me up to my dressing room, down to the green room, and they came in there and said, "I'm sorry, we ran out of time. Come back next week." So I came back the next week. That's what they call, they bump you. They said you were bumped. Next week, same thing. Makeup room, dressing room, green room. We ran out of time. They bumped me. 3 weeks in a row, I got bumped. Finally, the fourth time, I'm in the makeup room, and the producer came in the makeup room, and he said, "I got bad news for you." I said, "What?" He said, "You're going on tonight. Now, you get a lump in your throat the size of a grapefruit." and finally, they get me. I'm in the green room. It's time for me to go on. You take a long walk out of the green room, all the way behind that dark curtain. And the coordinator walks you there, and he said, "You?" Yeah, and he walks away. And now you're talking to God one-on-one. Oh my God, I forgot my first line. What's my first line? And yeah, the pressure is enormous. And so finally, the music stops because they're in commercial break. And Doc Severinsen was the musical director. The music stops and your heart stops because the lights come on and you hear Johnny Carson saying, "We're back now. And I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight because my next guest is making his first appearance on the Tonight Show. Will you welcome, please, Tom Dreesen." Now, that one line, "I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight," that set the tone for the audience, you know. And they open up that curtain and you walk out there and bright lights. And not, like I say, not only did 26 million people watch that show, but all the people who book Las Vegas, all the talent coordinators for TV shows, for sitcoms, agents, managers all around the country watched that show. So, and not only that, my mother had everybody back in Harvey, Illinois watching. So if I bomb, I can't even go back home, you know. So the pressure was enormous. But they open up the curtain and you walk out and you can't see the audience. The bright lights hit you, and you hear applause. And finally, you do your first joke, and it got a laugh. I did my second joke, and I did my third joke, and it got applause. And now I'm on a roll. I ended up getting applause. I got 8 applause. Johnny Carson's laughing behind me. It was a magic moment. I finished. I went back through the curtain, and the coordinator come running up. He said, go back. Johnny wants you to come back and take a second bow. You know? So I went back through the curtain, took another bow, and Johnny waved at me and gave me that. He used to go like this. He put that little circle with his hand, you know, and he went like this. And I never stopped working from that night. I never stopped working. From that next day, I was doing Dinah Shore, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Johnny Carson, Midnight Special, rock concert, Soul Train, American Bandstand. I was doing Hollywood Squares. I was doing $20,000 Pyramid. I was doing all these shows. Everybody, you know, all these singers that I told you about earlier, they all wanted me to tour with them. I just never stopped working, and I'm still working to this day.
That made me think. I didn't tell you this before. I did some stand-up in Romania a few years, and I went on a show and a TV show. I did some stand-up, and I remembered just what you said before I got on. I forgot the material, and I just started to talk. I was so nervous. I forgot the material, and I told the audience some other jokes, not what I had prepared, but what I came up with, so I won't be quiet, so I wouldn't shut up. And it went well. Surprisingly, it went well, but I was so nervous. Everybody after that told me, "Oh, you didn't seem nervous." I was a wreck. Yeah.
Well, you know, an old comedian, many years ago, an old comedian told me, and in show business, they call it going up on your lines, that you went up, meaning that you forgot your lines. If you're an actor and you're in a scene And they said, oh, you know, Cristi went up on those lines. That meant you forgot your lines. You forgot your material. So this old comedian told me one time, if ever that happens, if you're out there and you can't remember where you're going, just start talking and your brain will catch up. Just start talking. You know, they say, yeah, but you're a wonderful audience. And you notice it was raining out there today. And oh, by the way, my Aunt Mabel, you know, because they said, it's only when you stop and try to remember where you were, that little blank. But if you just keep talking, your brain will catch up. So that's what I've always done. You
know? In America, in the beginning, did comics steal jokes? Did they borrow material?
Yes. Yes, and you know, but in my day, it was a crime. I mean, if you had a reputation for taking someone else's material, it would hurt you throughout the industry. But today, they do it all over the place. It was a computer. You know, it's so funny. When I would do the Tonight Show, 26 million people would watch that. I'd be on like 11:30 at night. The next morning, a lot of my jokes are being sold to disc jockeys all around the country, to radio personalities. Guys would sit home and type up jokes and sell them in New Mexico or in Hawaii or in Boston, Massachusetts. It was, you can't protect comedy material, you know. So yeah, but in our circle, if you had a reputation for doing that, people, it was a terrible reputation to have. You know, I mean, I remember when I was in Las Vegas a lot, I would sometimes go, if I was there 2 weeks, I would go watch 6 or 7 comedians and go to each show, you know, late at night in the lounge act or something. And almost always those 7 comedians were all doing at least 1 or 2 or 3 of the same. They just told it different, you know. But, you know, people can steal your material. They can't steal your personality. They can't steal your timing, you know. The greatest thing can ever happen to a stand-up comedian is being caught in the act of being yourself. You know, there was a show years ago called Candid Camera, and that was what their line was: caught in the act of being yourself. And when you're a new comedian, you walk out on stage, and you're usually, when a brand new comedian is doing an impression of another comedian that they like. And I can watch a new comedian and say, oh, he likes George Carlin, or he liked David Letterman, or whatever. Jerry Seinfeld. But what happens, we all start out emulating another comedian. And then one night we let a little bit of us out and let a little bit more of us out. And pretty soon, when that's getting laughs, you're getting more confident. And pretty soon you become you on stage. You. There's never been anyone like you on this planet. No one's ever had your same parents, your same childhood, your same upbringing. So you're unique like the snowflake. You're unique. There's no two like you, no one else like you. So when you get confident in your own skin on that stage, and now it's you out there, you know, that's when you start to really grow as a comedian.
Opening for Sammy Davis Jr., after that for Sinatra. For me, that's just incredible. What can you tell us about that?
Well, you know, after I did my first appearance on the Tonight Show, you know, after I did my first appearance on the Tonight Show, Sammy Davis Jr. had a TV show, and he booked me on that show, and I had a great audience that night. I just knocked them dead. So Sammy said, "I'm going to take you on the road with me," and that just blew my mind because I was such a fan of Sammy Davis, you know. And to be with Sammy Davis Jr. was like going into a show business school every night. After my show, I and watch this guy. This guy could sing as good as anybody out there. He never hit a clinker. Frank Sinatra said that he never heard Sammy hit a bad note, you know. He could sing as good as anybody out there. He could dance better than anybody out there. He could do comedy as good as any comedian. He could do impressions better than any impression I ever. He could play the piano. He could play the drums. He could play the trumpet. It was, you know, to watch him walk out on that stage and take command. Just like Sinatra, you know, it taught me so much. Is sitting in the wings. They walked out there, and this was their house. When I first started touring with Sammy, the first night that I worked with him in Las Vegas was at Caesar. And, you know, it was opening. I never worked Las Vegas in those days. You know, that was 1977. I've been working there since then. But, you know, I was under contract at 7 different hotels there. But the first time, they had rehearsal. couple of interesting things. One was when you work with a big star like Sammy Davis, oftentimes you put the opening act's name on the marquee. They put the star in big letters, but you didn't see who the opening act was. Sammy never forgot that he once was an opening act, and he insisted they put my name big on that marquee, big, and it really was impressive to me. So he insisted. He said, "Tommy, I'm setting a precedent with you here. It's your first time in Vegas. Others will see this, and they'll have to do the same. Give you that kind of booking, that kind of a marquee bill." Then we go inside, and the conductor, the entertainment director at rehearsal, said to me, "Tommy, we do a 90-minute show. You'll do 20 minutes. Sammy does an hour and 10. You'll come out first, do 20 minutes. Comedians hated Caesar's Palace because it's a large ceiling. As you know, as a comedian, we like a small seating because laughter is sound. It hits the ceiling and comes at us. So the more intimate the room, the better we can do. I always like working the Desert Inn, the Sands Hotel, the Riviera, the Golden Nugget. They had small seatings, and it was a great comedy, atmosphere. But Caesar's had a big high seating, and they served food for the opening act. So people are eating dinner, and when people are eating dinner, they can't laugh. They don't laugh at you. They got food in their mouth, so they point the fork at you. They go, So that isn't going to help your timing any. So I knew that it would be a tough thing. So Nat Brandywine said, "Tom, you open." And Sammy said, "Hold on, Nat. This is Tom's first time here. He's got a score. All the critics are going to be in the audience. So I'll go on first. I'll sing 3 or 4 songs, and then I'll bring Tommy out. And Tommy, you do as much time as you want to. You feel like you've got him. And then I'll come out and I'll make up the time." So he did that every night. He'd walk out first. And now the waiters and waitresses' job is to get out of there before the star comes out. So when they saw Sammy come out, they started taking food away from people who hadn't even started eating yet. They were snatching the food away. And Sammy would do, 20 minutes, 3 or 4 songs. Then he'd bring me out. But when time I came out, the audience was up here. They were ready to go. So I got great reviews, and I never stopped working Vegas. Thank you, Sammy Davis Jr. He was an amazing, amazing performer. He went on stage when he was 2.5 years old. He wandered on stage with his dad. He was just barely, he was almost 3 years old. His dad had a dance group with his uncle, and they danced. And Sammy one night wandered out on stage and sang with his dad and his uncle. And they put it in the act. I mean, he was born to be in show business, absolutely born to be in show business. And a wonderful, wonderful, giving guy. He was a terrific guy.
You've met them all. Who impressed you the most?
Well, after this, after this, it's all downhill, Cristi. So far, you've impressed me the most. I have to tell you, there's no describing Frank Sinatra. I mean, there's no describing that rarefied air. When you see somebody going out night after night in front of 20,000 people, 20,000 people, when you see somebody that's a star that long, most people are stars 5 years, 10 years. How long can you hang on to that stardom? Frank Sinatra was a star for over 60 years, a star. Again, like I say, and when he's 78 years old, he sold out in Japan. What artist that comes from one country can go sell out 20,000 seat arenas in other countries? But Frank Sinatra's music was a soundtrack of people's lives. He was, again, rarefied air to be flying in his private jet all over the world. And squad cars and limousines rush you to the jet. Squad cars and limousines, you'd land in another city, and squad cars and limousines would rush you to the arena. You'd do the show. Squad cars and limousines would rush you back to the jet. You'd be flying over the venue. People weren't even in their cars yet from the show. You're on your way to your next city. It was rarefied air to be sitting around. I stayed at his home like 6 times a year. When I first started touring with Frank Sinatra, he was the boss of this tour. And he knew his job, and you better know yours. He only hired the best musicians, the best conductors, the best arrangers, and I like to think the best comedians, but
I'm sure he did.
But he was like the boss. But then as time went by, he became a buddy, a friend. We hung out together, and then I'd stay at his home 6 times a year down in Palm Springs area, Rancho Mirage. He had a big compound with big walls around it and bungalows all along the outer perimeter. And the bungalows were called New York, New York, Strangers in the Night, Tender Trap, named after his songs. And his house guests would be Gregory Peck and his wife, and Kirk Douglas and his wife, and Clint Eastwood and whoever he was dating at the time. And it'd be Jack Lemmon and Isaac Stern. And I mean, all these incredible people, you know, Angie Dickinson. And anyhow, and so being in that rarefied air, these were people that when I was a little boy shining shoes, I saw in movies, you know, that these were stars, and they're very comfortable in their own skin. They weren't prima donnas like today in Hollywood. If you had 2 appearances on TV, you think that everybody's supposed to bow down to you when you walk down the street, you know. These were stars that were very comfortable in who they were, and would pay more attention to you, asking you, well, tell me about stand-up comedy, Tom, and you know, it just was an incredible experience. And always these actors, how much reverence they showed to Frank, you know, because most people, what they forget about Frank Sinatra was what a brilliant actor he was. You know, this is a man who won the Academy Award in From Here to Eternity. But what about The Man with the Golden Arm? He should have won it there. Another movie called The Manchurian Candidate, and so many other movies. One night sitting around with all these stars and Frank, they were talking about acting and directing, and I was fascinated listening to these stories. And I said to Frank, you know, Frank, did you ever study acting? Because I was curious who he studied with. In Hollywood, they like the name drop of all who they studied with, you know, who the big teachers were. And Frank, before he could answer me, Gregory Peck grabbed my arm, said acting lessons would have ruined him. He was a diamond in the rough you didn't fool with. This guy danced with Gene Kelly in movies, for God's sake. You know, he starred in films and won the Academy Award. And when you gave Frank a song, to him it was a script. What did the writer feel the night the writer took pen in hand? Frank would immerse himself in that lyric and become that lonely guy in a bar, in the saloon, whose woman left him, and he's never going to find love again. And you felt that. You felt every bit of that emotion. So he was he was really, really, really impressive. And also, there was another side to him, aside from him being this brilliant artist that he was, that his generosity was overwhelming. One night we were coming out of the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and they were coming out the back way because if Frank went out the front, he got mobbed. So as we were going to the limousine, we were on our way to do a show. A woman jumped out of the doorway. The security was rushing us to the limousine. A woman jumped out of the doorway. The bellman told me she's hiding there for 5 hours. And she's hollering, Mr. Sinatra, please, Mr. Sinatra, please, please. And the security were back. And Frank got back out of the limousine, went over to her and said, what is it, ma'am? What is it? She said, my husband is home sick, very, very ill. If you could sign an autograph to him, it would mean the world to him because he's terribly ill. And Frank said, sure. And he's signing the autograph. And she said, oh, what beautiful cufflinks. And they were like $2,000 cufflinks. I know where he got them at. They're very expensive. He said, thank you very much. And he finished the autograph and he took the cufflinks off and he handed them to her and said, give these to your husband. She said, oh, no. No, I don't want them. I just was admiring them. He said, no, I want your husband to have them. And we got in the limousine and I said, Frank, that was beautiful, but why did you do that? He said, Tommy, if you possess something that you can't give away, then you don't possess it. It possesses you. And I never forgot that. He said, Aristotle Onassis, this multi-billionaire, had private jets. He owned his own airplanes. He owned his own mansions, his own yachts. The second he died, that transferred. He said, nothing we have is ours. We're only using it. So those are lessons I never forgot. He taught me so many things, but that's one of the lessons I've never forgotten. He said to me, you see that shirt you have on? If you die tomorrow, someone else will be wearing that shirt. You don't even own that shirt. I said, you're right.
Yeah, so true. Who makes you laugh whenever you see him or she on TV or in a show?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I know I sound like this is, there was a comedian many years ago called Will Rogers, brilliant comedian. He died in a plane crash in the 30s. But he said, I never met a man I didn't like. He said, I never met a man I didn't like. I've never seen a comedian I didn't like. I may not like them off stage, or they may not like me, but on stage, every comedian I see, if it's a Monday night and he's a new comedian, I still find something about them that I think is funny. Because if you've got the courage to get up there in front of an audience and try to make them laugh in front of a group of strangers, you already have my heart, you know. But through the years, I mean, obviously, there's so many comedians that made me. One two of them that I really stick out in my mind. One was a comedian named Jack Benny, and another comedian named Richard Pryor. You know, and for two totally different reasons. You know, Jack Benny made comedy look easy. You know, I think a person is an artist in any endeavor if they make their work look, one word, effortless. Frank Sinatra made singing look easy. You will be my music, you will be my song. You say, I can do that. No, you can't. He just made it look like you could. You know, Jack Benny made comedy look easy. He made it look effortless. He made comedy like you were standing on a street corner where I grew up at, and he was talking to everybody, you know. So, but I can't tell you how many comedians make me laugh. I love watching other comedians work. You know, when you go to a comedy room and if there's other comedians, 9 out of 10 of them won't laugh at you, and they claim, "Oh no, I was looking at how he got to that line or how she got that line." What they do, they pound the table. They pound the table. I'm different. I laugh because I love to laugh. I loved comedians before I was one, you know.
Do you still go to shows, to open mics, and watch new comedians?
Yeah, you know, I try out new material here at the Comedy Store at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood, and they sometimes have an open mic night, and oftentimes young comedians will get a hold of me through email, or they get a hold of me through somebody that knows me, and say, "Would you come and watch my set and give me some advice?" So I'll go on open mic nights and I'll try that. I'll watch and I'll you know, talk to them later. Now, if they bomb, and open mic nights, most people bomb. First of all, on an open mic night, the only people you have in the audience are other people who want to get up there. So most of them aren't going to laugh at you because, you know, it makes it harder for them. You know, they're not going to laugh and applaud. So my thing is that if I see an open mic kid bomb, a guy or a girl, and they feel real bad, I said, you know, I'll come back next week. If I come back next week and they're on again, I got confidence in them, because that's the hard part, getting back up. Because we've all bombed. I trained in bombing, you know. You know. So, you know, when you got the courage to get back up there and try it again, I know you're going to be all right, you know.
I bombed. I remember bombing at the beginning. I was very nervous, as I told you, when I went to that TV show. I was as nervous. I remember to this day, the first time I went on an open mic, same thing, forgot everything, looking down at the floor, walking nervously and looking down at the floor, forgot every line, remembered about 4 jokes, told those, and that was it. I went down, a few people laughed, and I remember some guys, other open micers, came to me right when I came off stage and said, "Hey, wanna tour with us? You're really good. Let's do stand-up." And I had 5 minutes.
Well, you know, that's good. You know, there's a couple of things. If you dissect comedy, it gets boring, but a couple of things. Number one, it's conversation, not presentation. How many times I've taught comedians, I give these motivation speeches I talk to you about, I sometimes give them to stand-up comedians in New York, in Boston, in Philadelphia, in Chicago, and Los Angeles. I call it, my lecture is called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and How to Get There. But I teach them that it's a conversation, not a presentation. I write that on the blackboard. When you walk out in that audience, it would almost be like I'd say to you, Cristi, it's like this. Your wife says to you, we've got 20 people in the living room and dinner isn't ready. I'm running way late. It's going to be ready in about 20 minutes. Go out there, Cristi, go out there and tell them some funny stories that, you know, and walk through that curtain. You're in your house. This is our house. You know, most comedians get uptight because we feel like we're invading their territory. No, 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 no. This is our house. If they could do what we do, they'd be up there and we'd be out there. So this is ours. So when you walk through that curtain, it's like pretend you're in your living room and you're going to start a conversation. You know, dinner's going to be ready in a few minutes, but I got to tell you, the other day I was on a bus and you start a conversation. Is it your act? You damn right it's your act. It's your job to make it look like it's not your act. You know, you got to take your act and make it look like a conversation, not a presentation, not an act. It is an act, you know, but you got to make it look more conversational. And the other thing, when you're writing a joke, comedy is two things when you're writing a joke. Number one, it's 9/10 surprise. The other rule is there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victim in the joke? You, me, you know, who's the victim? So the setup line has to hide the punchline. That's what comedy is, 9/10 surprise. You take them down the path of truth and then you drop the bottom out on them. They didn't see that coming. Most of the jokes you laugh are one of the two. Either one, you didn't see that coming, that's why you laughed. And the other thing is there was a clear victim. Even when you were talking about bombing, you started laughing. You know why? Because you were the victim in that joke. You know, and whenever comedians get together, by the way, and I've been doing this 51 years, if we're all in Las Vegas or wherever we are, and after our shows, we sit around 5 or 6 of us, the last thing you want to hear for Cristi to say, I got a standing ovation tonight. Boy, I killed him. They want to tell us about the time you bombed. That's all comedians want to hear about. Oh, one night I went up there and no one was laughing and I was supposed to do 20 minutes or I wouldn't get paid. And I did like 6 minutes and I was out of material and you know, and they tell them bombing stories. Comedians love to hear those stories, you know.
Yeah, so true. Do you remember the biggest crowd? How hard was it to make them laugh?
The biggest what?
The biggest crowd.
Oh, the biggest for me was 40,000 people in Hawaii. That was opening for Frank. See, when you open for Sinatra, every night it was 20,000 people, you know. The biggest to come to see me, I've done 1,200, you know, and when I was doing my one-man show, I've done 800, 900, something. That's big for me. But opening for Sinatra, you know, that's 20,000 people out there. You know, and in Hawaii, he had 40,000 people outdoors with big screens on to the left and right. You know, but I'm going to tell you, this is what it's like opening for Frank Sinatra, Cristi. I'm going to tell you, say we're at the Nassau Coliseum in New York, and you're opening for Frank Sinatra, Cristi. I say, there's 20,000 people out there, Chris, and I want you to go out there. Now they're not in front of you, proscenium, they're all around you. They're on the left to the right, they're behind you. You know, you're on a big stage in the center of an arena of 20,000 people. I say, Cristi, I want you to go out there, and for the next 45 minutes, there's 20,000 people. I want you to hold their attention for the next 45 minutes. Oh, one more thing, Chris. I want you to hold their attention, but I want you to make them laugh for 45 minutes. Oh, one more thing, Chris. I want you to hold their attention. I want you to make them laugh, but I want you to make them laugh when you want them to laugh. I want you to pull the strings and the emotions of 20,000 people. No props, no tricks, no charge, no special arrangement, no special lighting, no orchestra, nothing. But you and 1,000 people. And one more thing, Cristi, not one of them came to see you. And that's what you had to do every night. You had to walk out there in front of 20,000 people, and you got to get them. You got to get them because that's what your job is, to set this audience up. Now, I had been a veteran by the time I got to Sinatra. I had toured with a lot of different artists, and I had a few tricks. One thing you do, you always make the first joke on you. You got your A material. Don't do your A material right up front. You know, you don't do your, when you walk out, you know, when I would walk out, first of all, in the big arenas, you know, there's no marquee out in front of the big arenas. All the lights would go down low, you know, when it's showtime. Now, if there's 20,000 people out there, at least 3,000 are still looking for their seats, you know, because they never get there on time, right? So all the lights would go down low and the audience go, woo! And down in the orchestra pit, the orchestra would start up, bum, ba, da, dum, ba. They go, ah! Because they think Frank is coming out, you know. And they say, ladies and gentlemen, the comedy star of our show, Tom Dreesen, and on your way to the stage, you hear, oh, oh. Now, I would get up on stage and I would say, how many of you out there? I want you to applaud now. Now I'm to the left, to the right behind me. I say, I want you to applaud. How many of you out there thought Frank Sinatra was coming out? Applaud. And they would applaud. And I'd say, I know just how you feel. I'm a little bit disappointed myself. Now, the first joke is on me. Now the next thing I do, now I've got to get their focus to me right now. I can't go into A material right there. I got to get their focus to me. So I'd say, how many of you out there are in this arena for your very first time? Applaud. I didn't say raise your hand. I said applaud. How many are in this arena your first time? They'd applaud. I say, how many of you are seeing Frank Sinatra live your very first time? Applaud. And they'd applaud. I'd say, how many of you out there aren't wearing any underwear? Applaud. Whatever. They'd applaud. You see what I'm doing? I talk, react. I talk, you react. I talk, you react. I'm getting them to come to the focus here. I'm not going to do my A material there. And then once I got them focused to me on the stage, then I might do a couple of jokes that I wrote about that local area, whatever city we were in. I would do some research. I would say, your mayor Turngren the other day, what he said, and because I'd say something from the local area. I'd do a couple of jokes, and then I would go into my A material, but not till I got them focused on me, And that's how I stayed with Frank, all those years, because I did. I sound like bragging. I don't mean to brag, but I scored. Or otherwise, he wouldn't have kept me. I knew how to get that audience set up for him, because when he walked out, he created more excitement walking to the microphone than most people do with their whole act. Just watching Frank Sinatra walk to that microphone, the arena would be electrified.
Where do you think is the best place for stand-up? Do you have a favorite club?
Well, I mean, in Vegas, it was always the Desert Inn or the Sands, and Lake Tahoe was Harrah's. And the Laugh Factory in Hollywood is such a great little comedy room because it's got low ceiling, and when it's filled up, you can work on new material real good. There's certain things that have to be in place for a stand-up comedian to make it happen, and again, you can't separate people. You can't put 5 people to the left, 5 to the right, 6 in the back. They got to all be together, shoulder to shoulder. So, your energy, your comedy is going out through that audience and back up to you, through that audience and back up to you, whether you're a singer, a comic, an actor, whatever. So it's like an electrical current. If you put 5 people to the right, 4 to the left, and 6 in the back, you just took a scissors and cut that current off that we need. If it's a high ceiling, I need a lower seating. We want that sound, laughter sound. We set our timing off of that. I can teach you so many things, Cristi, about stand-up comedy. Structure, stage presence. I can teach you a lot of things. I can't teach you timing. You either have it or you don't. Now, the best way to describe timing to me is, and it's hard to describe that, is say you had a pond of water in front of you and you threw a rock as high as you could in the air. And the rock went as high as it could, and then it started slowly coming down, and it hit the pond, and it splashed. And then it rippled all the way across the pond. Let's say that's laughter. When that rock is on its way up, when laughter's on its way up, you don't move on your next line then. You just stepped on your own laugh. So when that laugh is on its way up, you let it go up. But some nights, when I go out there, I let it's starting to come down a little bit, and I move on my next line. Some nights I let it come down halfway, the laughter, and then I move on my next line. Some nights I let it hit that pond, and I move on my next line. Some nights I let it hit the pond and go all the way across, and then I move. I can't tell you before I go on because I don't know how the audience is going to be. My brain automatically adjusts to that. When you've been doing it for a long time, all of a sudden, don't move on that line yet. There's still a lot of laugh out there. Some nights that laugh is going boom, 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 and then it starts to die down and then kicks up, So it's timing, that you can't teach. I can't teach you timing. So that would be the hardest thing to describe is again, I say you either have it or you don't. And when I was with the comedy team, it was crucial because if I moved too fast, I stepped on my partner's laugh, or if he moved too fast, you get the laugh, you let the laugh, if tonight I went over to the Laugh Factory and I did 30 minutes of stand-up comedy, and tomorrow I did that same 30 minutes. Tonight I do it in front of 150 people at the Laugh Factory. If I did that same 30 minutes in front of 20,000 people, same material, it takes on a totally different dynamic because now the laughter is larger and bigger, you know. So anyhow, that's again, if you dissect comedy, it gets boring, but.
I'm gonna watch this video again after we finish it and note some some stuff. What would you say? Is it easier to do comedy as a duo or as a single act stand-up?
Oh, it's easier as a stand-up. As a duo, you got to always be aware of your partner and everything. You got to be, and after a while, you get real good at that. But as a stand-up, I can go anywhere I want to go. I can go anywhere I want to go. You know, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis did that. Jerry could go anywhere he wanted to go, but Dean knew when to bring him in. Dean knew when to bring him in. Dean was not only a straight man, he was a very good stand-up comedian himself. A lot of people never think of him as a comedian, but he had a great sense of timing and everything. But it's so much easier to do it by myself, you know, because again, you can, you know, I can go anywhere I want to go. I can call it, they call it, you know, in football in America, when the quarterback goes up there and they gave him a play, but he sees the defense read that, he can call it what they call an audible. An audible. He changes the play. As a stand-up, I can change the play. As a comedy team, I can't. You know, I can't change the on my partner. You know, that's very so much easier as a stand-up.
You mentioned football. I know you're a baseball fan, a big baseball fan. Do you like any other sports, like soccer? We're soccer boys here in Romania. Soccer, tennis.
When I was a little boy, I played soccer in school, in elementary school, you know, and I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. And I played golf with a guy named Vinnie Jones. He was from the United Kingdom. I don't know if you know who he is. He's an actor now. But him and I played golf, and he was a big soccer star, you know. They call it football in the United Kingdom. But yeah, so I enjoyed that. But I always loved sports. My whole life, I played a lot of sports. I played in baseball out here in a fast pitch league till I was 58 years old. I played basketball till I was 48 years old in a league. You know, even though I was in show business, when I come off the road, I would go into the gym and work out. I ran 3 marathons, you know, for multiple sclerosis. My sister had MS. So every year I'd run something called 26 miles for Darling. And people would pledge money for every mile I ran. And I would bring celebrities in from Hollywood, you know, and all these stars would come in and they'd run 1 block with me or 2 blocks or a mile, whatever they could run. Smokey Robinson's the only one who ran all 26 miles with me, you know. But anyhow, yeah, you know, I've always liked all different kinds of sports. I think the comedian, if you want to go the distance, you got to stay in shape. Because walking out in front of 20,000 people, that's kind of athletic, and you got to be out there for 35, 45 minutes, and you better be feeling good, you know, because you got a hangover and you know, all that. It's not a timid endeavor, you know. It's not for the weak at heart. You know, you got to be in shape. You got to feel good about yourself if you're going to go out there and try to make people laugh. So I think that you got to stay in shape. The problem with most comedians, this is my thought. In my 51 years in show business, 85% of all stand-up comedians I've met in my life are insecure, neurotic, sometimes psychotic, loved, starved wrecks, total wrecks. And the other 15% are gifted, confident people who say, I know how to write a joke and I know how to tell one. You know, I like to think that I'm in the latter, but never trust somebody that tells you they're sane, you know. You know, but so consequently, the comedian, a lot of comedians, they end up doing drugs, alcohol. I've known 5 great stand-up comedians that committed suicide. 5 good comedians, wonderful comedians, Robin Williams being one of them, you know, wonderful comedians. And Freddie Prinze, my friend, you know, and then another 20 that destroyed their lives through alcohol and drugs. You know, this is, that's why I've always embraced athletics. You know, I've always worked out and tried to stay in shape, you know.
You mentioned Robin Williams. I read in the book Nice Story. Robin Williams' brain was extraordinary. It went all ways. And you said there he had a TV show. And once he did your joke on the TV show, or I remember correctly. And then you met and had a talk, and he wanted to buy the joke from you. He offered you money to buy the joke.
Yeah, I told he you know, when he first came to LA, I had already done a couple of Tonight shows. I was headlining a club, and he was my opening act. You know, and there were two other acts too, and he blew me away. First time I saw him, I said, "Wow, what planet did this guy come from?" He was wonderful, and I love Robin. He was the kindest, sweetest, most gentle human being I ever met in my life. I never met anybody. He never had a bad word to say about anyone. No one. He was just a sweetheart of a guy, just a sweetheart of a guy, and such a troubled genius. You know, talent is something that you possess. Genius is something that possesses you. Those are my thoughts, and his genius possessed him. But you know, his brain was like a sponge. Everything he saw, he absorbed. And one night on Mork and Mindy, he did one of my jokes, and it was a TV show he was on. And that means I can't do it anymore. But I went to him. I went and had a long talk with him, and he said, "Tommy, I'll buy it from him." I said, "No, I don't want you to buy it from him." He was a genius to watch. He wasn't afraid to fail. He would go out there on a limb with some material that he didn't have an ending for, but he would go, he'd risk. You know, they tell us in acting classes that good actors risk. They'll risk in a scene sometimes, a good actor. Good comedians do too. Some nights they just follow their stream of consciousness and let their brain go wherever they want it to go. And sometimes a nugget comes out, a gold nugget. And Robin was that way. He would risk, he would go out on a limb sometimes, and he would find something out there. You know, Robin couldn't do what I do 6 minutes. When I went on the Tonight Show, I had to come up with 6 minutes of material, of original material, because Johnny Carson didn't want two guys going to bar jokes. He wanted original monologues. So I would take a tape recorder and work on the material for weeks, where I would get 22 to 26 laughs. And then I knew I had a tight 5 or 6 minutes. Okay. Robin couldn't do 6 minutes. He could do an hour, but you couldn't ask him to go in there and put himself in a box. He couldn't do that. He was all over the place. His brain went everywhere, you know. He was incredible to watch, you know.
You mentioned earlier that when a comedian meet, they want to hear about other comedians bombing. Do you have a story? Do you remember your worst show, or a show that went so bad you still remember it?
Oh, I remember so many times that I failed, but I always think they're not failures, because part of success is failure. But I've had some wicked. I had some nights. I remember one night I was at the improvisation in Hollywood, and I was trying out some new material. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was like 17 people in the audience, and they were scattered, and I couldn't see. It was dark, and I was on stage. So I tried a new joke, and it would barely get a laugh, you know. But anyhow, I did a joke, and it barely got a laugh, and the guy in the back, in the darkness, topped that joke. He got a bigger laugh. So I would do a line, and it would get a laugh, and this guy in the back would get a bigger laugh. He'd shout something out. Now the audience there's only a few people in the audience, but they're getting a kick out of it. So we were going back and forth. I couldn't see him. And finally, I did something that got a laugh. He did something that got a bigger laugh. And then I did laugh of the night. I should have left the guy alone, because when it got the big laugh, I stepped out of the spotlight and I said into the darkness, between you and me, I won that one. And in the darkness, he said, between you and me, you needed it. So he taught me again, you know. But I went outside later and I met him, and I said, "Are you a comedian?" He said, "No." I said, "Are you a comedy writer?" He said, "No." He lived in Aurora, Colorado. I remember that. And I said, "Do you write comedy?" He said, "No." He said, "I just like comedians, and I hope you don't mind. I was having fun." I said, "No, I think you're brilliant. I'd like for you to write me some jokes." And I gave him my card, but he never got a hold of me. But I remember one night, Tim Reed and I, we opened up in a big theater in Chicago for Sha Na Na, when Sha Na Na was a biker group at that time, and tough group. and we just bombed a horrible death. You know, we didn't get one laugh, and people throwing beer cans on the stage, and and I mean, I remember a lot of nights like that. So with the comedy team, one night at University of Illinois, a guy went outside in the snow and packed an ice ball and hit me right in the face with the ice ball. And another night, a guy at a club put a lit cigarette out in Tim Reed's face. It's in my book. We got in a big fight that night. I mean, today it's interesting. When I started out, we worked nightclubs. There were no comedy clubs, so there were hecklers. You had to expect that. Today at the comedy rooms all around the country, they make an announcement. There'll be no heckling. Please, you're disrupting the other people in the audience. They came to enjoy the evening, so there'll be no heckling. If you heckle, the doorman will come and take you out. When I started out, hecklers were, that was part of your act,
Do you think people laugh easier if the material is not clean?
Some people do. There's a difference between, we call it blue material. I don't know, in Romania, they call that when you're working off color or doing sexual jokes or using the F word, we call it working blue, mean working, dirty. Oh, they don't use that term. Anyhow, it's easy to write a joke like that. I'm not approved. I'm a street guy. Like I say, I don't have a degree from academia, but I got a doctorate from the streets. I grew up on the street. Every dirty joke there was, and I laugh at them and I tell them. But I could never do that and make money when I started out. In those days, there was no cable television, only ABC, NBC, CBS. So you had to work clean. You had to write material that could make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh. When cable television came along, you could say whatever you want to say. Here's the problem with the F word. It's a noun, it's a pronoun, it's an adjective, it's an adverb. You throw it in whenever you can't think of anything funny, and everybody's supposed to laugh. Young kids laugh because they think you're pushing the envelope. You're being naughty, because you can say the F word. But my grandmother says the F word, so you're not shocking anybody anymore. I'll tell you a funny story. I was going to try some new material at the Laugh Factory, and I was upstairs getting ready to go down on stage. And around the corner, there were two young comedians, and they didn't know I was there, and I didn't know they were there. And I heard them talking, and one of them said, Tom Dreesen is here. And the other comedian said, oh yeah, he's old. The other comedian said, what do you mean old school? He said, he doesn't use the F word. The other comedian said, he doesn't use the F word. What does he use for adjectives? And I stuck my head around the corner and I said, adjectives. That's what I use for adjectives. So again, it's lazy comedy. I tell new comedians, when you write your first hour clean, just to challenge your creativity. And then if that isn't your style, go ahead, go do whatever you want to do, because we have freedom of speech in this country. The politically correct police are trying to stop that. They're trying to tell you what you can say from now on. And I tell comedians, stand-up comedy is the last gen of freedom of speech. That's the First Amendment in our Constitution. The right to say whatever you want to say. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater, but you have a right. Thousands of men and women died so that we have the right to say what we want to say in this country. You don't have to listen to us. You can turn us off. You can walk out the door. But you can't stop people from having the right to say whatever they want, the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And today, you got to be real careful, because the so-called woke society is going to try to tell you what you can say. And if you allow that, their next step is to tell you you have to think. And then you're a communist country, and we don't want to be that in America. So I tell new comedians, challenge your creativity, write as much clean material as you can, and then, clever, clean material. Then if that doesn't please you, then go the other way. Then be as, again, today I see young girls talking about sexual acts and stuff that never could happen in our day, other than some late night club. But today, you can pretty much say what you want. You don't offend me, if you have an audience for that, I just made more money working clean, Frank Sinatra would have never taken me with him if I even said the word hell or damn. Sammy Davis Jr. They had family audiences. Smokey Robinson, Natalie Cole, Gladys Knight and the Pips. Everybody I opened for, they had family out there, family audiences. And they didn't want to see a comedian that worked filthy. Today, some acts might hire that, but if you're going to offend people, if it offends, first of all, let me explain. If you're the headliner and those people paid to see you, do whatever you want. If you're the opening act for a big star, they have the right to tell you what kind of material they want you to do. Not the exact material, but they have the right to tell you, look, I don't want my audience being offended. So do me a favor. If you're going to open for me, don't use the F word. Don't use, you know, and if you don't like that, you can, well, I'm not going to do the job. But if they're paying you to open for them, then they can dictate policy. See, when you're a star, like I say, when your name on the marquee fills the room, then you can do whatever you want, you know. But if I go to work for a corporation, I can make more money on a corporate date than I could make for a whole month in a comedy club. One corporate date for IBM or American Airlines. Now, the heads of corporate, when people in a nightclub come to see you, they're at the mercy of your material. When corporate America hires you, or corporations, they can tell you, look, I don't want you, these are my clients, these are my customers, these are my employees. They can dictate policy.
How do you build a stand-up career? If there's a kid watching us right now, what should he do?
Well, start where you are. Wherever you are, start there. You know, if you're in Toledo, Ohio, if you're in Romania, wherever you are, start there. You know, go around, find out every opportunity you can to get up on stage. You know, work, number one, start where you are. Two, work as often as you can. Get up on stage every time, volunteer for charities, go to open mic nights. You know, every chance you get to get up on stage, go up on stage, work as often as you can. You know, volunteer for charity for your church or wherever it is, and say, let me be the master of ceremonies. I'll help you with the auction. And then you get stage presence, and you can slip a joke or two in there. You know what I mean? So get used to, you know, do it as often as you can. 3, read the book, The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. If you don't believe in yourself, how can you expect others to believe in you? You know, I say read a lot of those positive mental attitude books like The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. 4, realize no one is ever going to help you. You're on your own. You know, no one has ever helped you. You know, and when I say that, you know, until you're marketable, Cristi, until you can make money for an agent or a promoter, they're not going to help you. You know, they're going to say, oh, they'll encourage you maybe, but you're on your own in this thing. You got to put together your effort, you know, and set goals and do it as a job. You know, if you think that you're going to be on stage one night and some guy's going to come up to you, some man or woman is a big agent and discover you, that's rare. You got to first have the talent for them to want to discover you. So you got to keep working on that. And then 5, I'd say, if you really want it more than anything in the world, don't ever quit. Claude, what was it? I think it was Claude Bristol once said, Claude Bristol said, there are people in show business who become major stars simply because they didn't have sense enough to quit when they should have. And that's my story, and that's everybody's story. That's why my book is called Still Standing, because I'm a stand-up comedian 51 years, but I've been knocked down a lot in my life, and I kept getting back up again. I was physically knocked down, as you read in the book, or you will read in the book, you know, so, but I kept getting back up again. So 5 things. Number 1, start where you are, work as often as you can. 3, read the book, The Magic of Believing. 4, realize no one is ever going to help you. If I have a sign on my desk says, if it is to be, it's up to me. You know, you got to do it. You got to make yourself a marketable product. And then 5, you know, don't ever quit. Have bulldog tenacity. This is what you want. Don't ever quit. You know, and that's my story of my book. I was knocked down. I can't tell you how many times. I was told to go home. I was told to forget about it. I was told, you know, get a job. And I never gave up my dream, you know. And it's your time on this planet. You're only here for a blink of an eye. I was on an airplane one time, flying from Boston, from LA to Boston, and I had read everything but I read everything but the air sickness bag on the airplane. I was bored to death. I picked up an old magazine that was about anthropology. a guy named Carl Sagan. And I was reading, and I wasn't that much interested, but it said, dinosaurs ruled this planet for 250 million years. And I'm reading this. It said, man, in its present form from Cro-Magnon to Neanderthal to now, has been ruling this planet for 100,000 years, something like that. But dinosaurs ruled it for 250 million years. I'm reading this and said, and this planet here is on Earth has been here for like 5 billion years, according to science. Not thousands, not million, 5 billion years. And it's going to be here 5 billion more years after, because the sun is moving closer to the Earth. And one day the sun will destroy this planet and it'll look not unlike Mars looks right now, 5 billion years from now. And I put that book down and I said, this planet was here 5 billion years before. Not thousands, not million, 5 billion. It's going to be here 5 billion after I die. That means my lifetime on this planet is a blink of an eye, a speck of sand. Boom, it's over. That you would spend one moment of that blink of an eye bitching and moaning and cursing your lot in life is an absurdity. An absurdity. It's spitting in your master's face saying, I don't appreciate this great gift of life. That you would spend one moment of that blink of an eye pursuing a dream that was your mom's and your dad's, but it wasn't yours. Or pursuing somebody else's dream, not yours. Again, is absurd. This is your blink of an eye, your moment on this planet. You know, don't let anybody take away your dreams, you know. And that's my advice. That's a very long answer to a short question there, Cristi.
It's a very good one. Doesn't matter, long or short. I wasn't kidding earlier when I said I can't wait to watch this video again and enjoy it without being so nervous. I really want to watch it again. I read all my questions. I have some good questions from the viewers, which I didn't read, but I want to read at least one. Somebody said here, in the last 50 years, how did the world change? Is it better or worse?
In my opinion, so many wonderful things have changed on the earth. One is that we can communicate like you and I are doing right now. You know, we can communicate across the world. The sad thing is the messages are all different. You know, I think that technology in so many ways has advanced us as a culture, in so many ways has destroyed us, because we're not socially. We used to have to learn to communicate with strangers that you meet, people you meet. Now you text back and forth. You know, people sitting at the same table text to each other. You know, I think you know. Let me put it this way. If ever we can stop the wars on this planet, then we're on our way. You know, if ever we can, you know, that's a very good question. How has the world changed? Has it changed for the better or for the worse? Again, I think it all depends on you. You know, when I give motivation talks, I tell the students, whoever they are, before this is over, I'm going to give you the secret. I said, you know, for a happy life, for a successful life, before this talk is over, and I'll talk for 1 hour on those 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. And when I get done, I tell them, and here's the secret. The secret, you're the secret. You know, how the world is how you perceive the world to be. You know, when I was a kid, we used to sing in church, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. You know, in your world, you know, the way you perceive it is the way it is. You know, the oldest cliche of the glass is half empty or half full. You know, the optimist says the glass is half full. The negative person says the glass is half empty. And the engineer says the glass is twice as big as it's supposed to be, you know. But, you know, again, I'm saying all that to say that you have to create your world, you know, the world you live in. This vehicle you were given, that body you have right there, that's the vehicle you were given. You know, tell the class, this is your vehicle. The pilot who lands a 747 every day, say him flying from Los Angeles to Romania, he doesn't drive to the airport 100 miles an hour. drive out to the tarmac, run aboard the aircraft, take off down the runway and say, now where am I going? He files a flight plan. You have to file a flight plan. This is the vehicle you were given. You have to file a flight plan. I take a glass of water and I pour dirt in it and I stir it. And I tell the class, somebody drink this, and no one will drink it. I say, you won't put dirt in this part of your mouth, your body. You won't ingest dirt in this part. You ingest filth in this part of your body. You know, why would you put dirt in your brain? Negative thoughts are dirt. You know, if you want to plant positive thoughts in your brain, you know, like flowers, say you're going to plant a flower garden, and you plant the flower garden and weeds grow. Would you let the weeds grow? You dig up the weeds and replant flowers. So negative thoughts swirl in the universe and they come into our minds. We don't have to harbor them. We can capture them and say, no, I don't want to think that way, and change it to a positive thought. You know, you have that kind of control. You have the power to yourself. You really do. You know, you don't have to let outside influences tell you how to run this ship that you have. You know, other people's words have no power over you unless you allow them to have power. Your own negative thinking has no power over you unless you allow it to have power. You know, so you are in control. That's the point I'm trying to make. It so you can make the world the way you want the world. And I'll close with this. There's a famous old saying that a guy went to the master and he said, "Master, I'm moving to Albuquerque, New Mexico." I'll just name a town. And he said, "Master, I'm moving to Albuquerque, New Mexico. What kind of people live there?" And the master said, "What kind of people lived where you came from?" He said, "They were mean, evil, selfish, despicable human beings." And the master said, "The same kind of people live in Albuquerque, New Mexico." And another man walked up later and he said, "Master, I'm moving to Albuquerque, New Mexico. What kind of people live there?" He said, "What kind of people lived where you came from?" He said, "They were kind, loving, passionate, caring people." The master said, "The same kind of people live in Albuquerque, New Mexico." So what you bring to the table. You see what I mean? I'm saying all that to say, you know, that was a long story.
That's wonderful. Well, Mr. Dreesen, those are all the questions. In the end, I always ask the guest to say anything he wants to the viewers. So please.
Well, I mean, you know, I just about said all that right there. You know if I would give you any advice, laughter is healing. You know, and that's not a joke anymore. It used to be a theory that laughter is healing because people say, well, it's a psychological deterrent. The brain can't think of two thoughts at the same time. So if you're laughing at a comedian, you're not thinking of your problems, or if you're laughing at something, you know, so it's a psychological deterrent. But now, because of a man named Norman Cousins, he wrote a book called Laughtermath. He wrote another book called The Anatomy of an Illness. He was the editor of a magazine called the Saturday Review. And he had a terminal illness. He was in the hospital. The doctors told him he was going to die. He had a heart condition. And they said from years of stress that this heart condition that he didn't have long. He laid in the hospital and he thought, if negative input, stress made me ill, then positive input should make me well. So he checked out of the hospital and he'd only watch comedies, you know, I Love Lucy, Candid Camera, Three Stooges, the Marx Brothers. He would only watch comedies and he listened to comedy albums. He wouldn't watch the evening news. He wouldn't read the newspapers. And he'd laugh out loud every day. He lived 27 years after the doctors told him he was going to die. And because of him, UCLA here in LA did research on what happens to the human body when you laugh. And they found out when you have a hearty laugh, you know, you laugh so hard that tears are running down your eyes and you go, oh, and the sense of well-being comes over you. It's because the brain, when you're laughing like that, releases endorphins into the blood, which are chemicals. And so there's an actual chemical change comes over your body when you have a hearty laugh. So laughter is not only a psychological deterrent, it's physiologically therapeutic. So comedians are physicians of the soul. You can call me Dr. Dreesen if you want, but anyhow, my point is, if I say, laugh out loud every day. When I was in acting class, we had to learn how to cry in a scene as well as laugh, you know. And so laugh out loud. Sometimes I'll walk around my condominium and I'll go, ha, 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 ha. Especially when something stressful is going through my mind. I'll go in the bathroom, I'll look in the mirror and I'll go, ha, 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 ha. It's so healthy. Laugh out loud. My advice to everybody, laugh out loud 10 times a day, and especially at yourself. The greatest gift a God can bestow upon a human being is a sense of humor. And a sense of humor is not when you have the ability to laugh at others' shortcomings or misfortunes. It's when you have the ability to laugh at your own. Laugh at yourself. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. We all have flaws. You know, I was on a TV show one time. The question was asked, this is for you guys out there. Of 3,500 women polled, what's the #1 characteristic they look for in a man? And it was a sense of humor. Some guy who didn't take himself too serious. He laughed at himself. You want to make a marriage last? Show me if your spouse is the one that makes you laugh. You know, if your spouse, you know, pokes fun at themselves and makes you laugh, that's a happy home. And show me a happy home, I'll show you a marriage that's going to last for a long time. So how important is laughter in the world? And you can bring that into your world. And you can teach your children a sense of humor. The way you do it is every time you do a dumb thing, now your children look at you like you're God. They can't picture the world without you. You're the God of their universe, you mom and dad. But if you could come home and share, say, what did I tell you what dumb thing I did today? I was getting out of the car, I dropped the groceries, I went over, bent over, I fell on my head, I hit my head. And they laugh, they start sharing things they did dumb at school or something like that. My children have the greatest sense of humor. They'll poke fun at themselves, and they learn that from me. I taught them to, you know, laugh at yourself. So laughter, I say that's my closing words. Bring laughter into your universe, and you have the responsibility to do it, and you have the power to do that. You know, bring a lot of laughter into your universe. And if no one's around, laugh at yourself. The best way to learn how to do it, the first thing you do when you get out of bed in the morning, go straight in and look at the mirror. If that doesn't make you laugh, nothing.
Awesome. That was perfect. The perfect ending. Thank you again, Mr. Dreesen. You have no idea how much this meant to me. Thank you to all the viewers. Have a nice night. Take care. Be good anytime you can, and you always can. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Cristi.